I think I didn't do anything wrong, just told the truth about my husband in front of friends. He always seemed so weak, and everyone laughed with me, until the day a court officer handed me divorce papers. I never imagined the same quiet man could turn my own words and actions into evidence against me. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The living room of our suburban home buzzed with the familiar sounds of Sunday afternoon. Amelia's cartoons mixing with Noah's video game bleeps, while I prepared snacks in the open-plan kitchen. Callum sat at the dining table, quietly reviewing work documents, his dark hair falling across his forehead in that way that used to make me smile. Now it just looked tired. "Daddy, why do you always look sad?" Amelia's 8-year-old voice cut through the noise, and I watched Callum's shoulders tense. "I'm not sad, sweetheart," he said softly, pulling her onto his lap. "Just thinking about grown-up things." I rolled my eyes as I arranged crackers on a plate. "Your father thinks too much about everything, honey. That's just how he is." Joan and Eric, Callum's parents, exchanged one of their looks, the kind that had become increasingly frequent during family visits. Joan's lips pressed into that thin line I'd grown to hate, while Eric cleared his throat and focused intently on his coffee. "Lyra," Joan said carefully, "perhaps we could—" "Oh, don't start," I interrupted, waving the cheese knife dismissively. "We're all going out tonight anyway. Mike's bar, remember? I promised the gang we'd finally make it out for drinks." Callum looked up from Amelia's hair. "I thought we were staying in tonight. The kids have school tomorrow." "The kids will be fine. Mum's watching them." I glanced at my phone, smiling at Ian's latest text. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear that blue dress. Besides, you need to get out more, socialize, act like a normal person for once." The silence that followed felt heavy, but I was already mentally planning my outfit. The blue dress Ian mentioned was perfect. It showed off my figure and always got attention. Not that Callum would notice. Mike's Bar and Grill was packed with the usual Friday night crowd, though it was actually Sunday, a fact that made our group feel rebellious and special. I'd claimed the center seat at our usual high-top table, with Ian strategically positioned across from me, and Callum relegated to the far end next to my sister Marla. "So, Callum," my friend Jessica called out over the music, "Lyra tells us you've taken up cooking. That's so sweet." I laughed before Callum could respond. "Sweet is one word for it. Last week, he spent 3 hours making dinner and forgot to turn on the oven. We ended up eating cereal." The table erupted in laughter, and I felt that familiar rush of being the center of attention. Ian's eyes crinkled with amusement as he shook his head. "Come on, Lyra," he said with that charming smile that made my stomach flutter. "Give the man some credit." "Oh, I give him plenty of credit," I shot back, emboldened by the wine and the audience. "He's very thorough. Takes him 20 minutes to decide what to watch on Netflix. By the time he picks something, I've already finished a whole series on my laptop." More laughter. I was on a roll. And don't get me started on how he handles confrontation. Last month, our neighbor's dog kept barking at night, and instead of going over there like a normal person, Callum researched city noise ordinances for a week. Then he wrote a 3-page letter with citations. "Did it work?" someone asked. I glanced at Callum, who was slowly turning his beer bottle in his hands. "Eventually, but only because I finally went over there myself and sorted it out in 5 minutes." "That's our Lyra," Marla chimed in, raising her glass. "She gets things done." I basked in the approval, but something made me look back at Callum. His face was unreadable, but there was something different in his eyes. Not hurt. I was used to that. This was something else, something colder. "I think I'm going to head home," he said quietly, standing and reaching for his wallet. "Already?" I made a show of checking my phone. "It's barely 10. "Early morning tomorrow." He placed a 20 on the table, enough to cover both our drinks and tip, always overly generous, even when he was clearly upset. "You stay. Have fun." He leaned down to kiss my cheek, a gesture so automatic I barely registered it, and then he was gone, weaving through the crowd toward the exit. "Well, that was dramatic," I said, taking a long sip of my wine. "See what I mean? He can't even handle a little teasing." Ian's expression had shifted slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Maybe he's just tired." "He's always tired," I replied, "or stressed or worried about something. It's exhausting being married to someone who takes everything so seriously." The conversation moved on to other topics, but I kept glancing at my phone. No text from Callum asking when I'd be home, no missed calls. Usually he'd check in at least once. The silence felt strange, but I pushed the thought away. I was having fun. For once, I was exactly where I wanted to be, with people who appreciated my wit and personality. If Callum couldn't handle that, it was his problem, not mine. What I didn't know was that as Callum sat in his car in the parking lot, he wasn't driving home. Instead, he was typing a text message to someone, a conversation that would change everything. "Can't do this anymore. Need to talk. Are you available this week?" The response came quickly. "Of course. Monday at 2 p.m. work for you?" Callum stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back, "Yes. Thank you, David. I'll bring everything we discussed." As I laughed with my friends inside, completely oblivious, Callum finally started his car and drove home to relieve my mother and check on our children. But for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about how to fix our marriage. He was thinking about how to protect himself from it. The Monday morning coffee ritual at our office had become my favorite part of the workday. Ian and I had fallen into an easy rhythm, arriving early, claiming the break room before the rush, and sharing those precious 20 minutes of conversation that felt like stolen time. "You look tired," Ian observed, leaning against the counter as I doctored my coffee with extra cream. His concern felt genuine, warm, so different from Callum's distant politeness that morning. "Late night," I admitted. "Callum was in one of his moods when I got home. You know how it is." Ian's jaw tightened slightly. "He gave you grief about going out?" "Not exactly grief. More like silent disappointment, which is somehow worse." I sighed, enjoying the way Ian's attention made me feel seen. He was already in bed when I got home, but I could tell he was awake, just lying there, radiating disapproval. "That's not fair to you." Ian's voice held an edge of protective anger that made my pulse quicken. "You're allowed to have friends, to go out and enjoy yourself. Try telling him that." I moved closer under the pretense of reaching for sugar packets, close enough to catch Ian's cologne. Sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating in that house. Our fingers brushed as he handed me a stirrer, and the contact sent electricity up my arm. We'd been dancing around this attraction for months, but lately, the dance was becoming more obvious. "You deserve better than that, Lyra." His voice was low, intimate. "You're vibrant, funny, alive. You shouldn't have to dim that for anyone." The break room door opened, and we stepped apart automatically. Janet from accounting bustled in, chattering about her weekend, and the moment dissolved. But the warmth in Ian's eyes lingered, and I carried it with me through the morning like a secret. That evening, dinner at the Danton household was a study in polite dysfunction. Noah, now 10, had perfected the art of eating while staring at his plate, answering questions with grunts and shrugs. Amelia chatted about her day until she sensed the tension and gradually fell silent. "How was work?" Callum asked, serving himself from the pasta bowl with mechanical precision. "Fine, busy." I kept my answer short, not trusting myself to mention Ian without my face giving something away. "How was yours?" "Productive." He paused and I caught something in his tone. "Had an interesting meeting this afternoon." "Oh?" I was only half listening, my mind still replaying Ian's words about deserving better. Just planning ahead, making sure everything's in order. Something in his phrasing should have caught my attention, but Amelia chose that moment to knock over her water glass, and the chaos of cleanup pushed the conversation aside. Later, as I loaded the dishwasher, Callum appeared beside me with the serving dishes. "Lyra," his voice was quiet, careful. "Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Are you happy? With us? With this? He gestured vaguely at the kitchen, the house, the life we'd built. I felt a flicker of panic, though I couldn't say why. Of course I'm happy. Why would you ask that? You seem distant lately, distracted. And last night I went out with friends. Normal people do that, Callum. I know, that's not what I meant. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as frustration. I just feel like we're not connecting anymore. Like you're somewhere else even when you're here. The accusation stung because it held truth I wasn't ready to examine. Maybe if you made an effort to be more interesting, I wouldn't need to look elsewhere for conversation. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, and I watched Callum's face close off completely. I see. He dried his hands methodically, folded the towel with precise corners. Well, I suppose that answers my question. He left the kitchen without another word, and I stood there surrounded by the detritus of family dinner, feeling simultaneously guilty and justified. Why should I apologize for wanting more than this mundane existence? Why should I settle for someone who couldn't even fight for what he wanted? My phone buzzed with a text from Ian. Thinking about our conversation this morning. Hope your evening is better than expected. I smiled despite myself, typing back quickly. It's getting better now. His response was immediate. Good. You deserve all the happiness in the world. I deleted the conversation thread before going upstairs, a habit I'd developed without really thinking about it. Callum was already in bed, reading a legal thriller with the focused attention he brought to everything. He didn't look up when I entered the room. Callum? Are you upset with me? He marked his place in the book and looked at me with those steady brown eyes that had once made me feel cherished and now just made me feel scrutinized. No, Lyra, I'm not upset with you. But something in his tone suggested that upset would have been preferable to whatever he was actually feeling. As I went through my nighttime routine, I caught him watching me in the bathroom mirror with an expression I couldn't read. When I came to bed, he was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay in the darkness, thinking about Ian's easy smile and the way he made me feel interesting, desirable, alive. Callum's steady breathing beside me felt like a reproach, a reminder of everything ordinary and predictable about my life. What I didn't know was that Callum wasn't asleep. He was staring at the ceiling, thinking about his meeting that afternoon with David Morrison, the family law attorney his brother had recommended. Thinking about the advice he'd received, the steps he needed to take, the evidence he should start collecting. And he was thinking about my answer to his question about happiness, not just the words I'd said, but the way I'd said them, the guilt that had flashed across my face before the defensiveness kicked in. For the first time in our marriage, Callum was planning ahead without including me in the plan. Sunday dinner at Joan and Eric's house had been a monthly tradition since Callum and I got married, but lately, these gatherings felt more like performances where I couldn't quite remember my lines. The suburban split level with its perfectly maintained garden and family photos covering every surface usually made me feel claustrophobic, but today I was determined to win back some ground. Lyra, dear, you look lovely, Joan said as we arrived, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She hugged the children with genuine warmth, but offered me only a polite nod. Thank you, Joan. I love what you've done with the living room. It was a lie. She'd rearranged the same furniture for the third time this year. But I was trying to be pleasant. Eric emerged from his den, Sunday paper still in hand, and embraced Callum with the kind of easy affection I envied. How's work treating you, son? Can't complain. Callum's response was measured, but I caught the meaningful look that passed between father and son. Staying busy. That's good. Important to stay prepared. Eric's emphasis on the last word felt loaded with subtext I couldn't decode. Dinner was Joan's usual production. Pot roast with all the trimmings, homemade rolls, green beans cooked to her mother's exact specifications. She prided herself on maintaining traditions, a fact she mentioned frequently and pointedly, usually while glancing at me. "Amelia, sweetheart, tell Grandma about your school project," I prompted, trying to steer the conversation to safer ground. As Amelia launched into an enthusiastic description of her diorama about the solar system, I felt myself relaxing slightly. This was manageable. Family dinner, normal conversation, no drama. "And Daddy helped me paint Jupiter's red spot," Amelia concluded proudly. "Of course he did," Joan said warmly. "Your father is very good at helping with important things." The comment seemed innocent enough, but something in Joan's tone made me defensive. "I help too. I'm the one who bought all the supplies." "Of course, dear." Joan's smile was razor-thin. "It's wonderful when both parents contribute." The passive-aggressive undertone was unmistakable, and I felt my carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. "Actually, I handle most of the household management," I said, reaching for my wine glass. "Callum's great with the hands-on stuff, but someone has to keep track of schedules, appointments, social obligations. The mental load, you know?" Eric cleared his throat uncomfortably, but Joan's eyes sharpened with interest. "The mental load," she repeated. "How challenging that must be." "It really is. Sometimes I feel like I'm running everything single-handedly." I was warming to the theme, encouraged by what I interpreted as Joan's sympathy. Take last week. I had to organize Amelia's playdate, handle Noah's teacher conference, manage our social calendar, and Callum didn't even realize any of it was happening. Callum's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "I was at Noah's conference with you." "Well, yes, but I'm the one who scheduled it, remembered it, made sure we both showed up on time." I laughed, the sound coming out sharper than intended. "You know how you are with details." The silence that followed felt different from the usual family dinner awkwardness. Noah had stopped eating entirely, and Amelia was looking between her grandparents and parents with the confused expression of a child sensing adult tension she couldn't understand. "Callum seems quite capable of managing details when it matters," Eric said quietly. "Oh, he's very thorough," I agreed, missing the warning in his tone. "Sometimes too thorough. He researches everything to death instead of just making decisions. It's sweet, but not very decisive." Joan set down her fork with deliberate precision. "Lyra, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you actually like your husband?" The question hit like a slap. "Excuse me." "It's just that every time you speak about Callum, it sounds like you're describing a particularly disappointing employee, rather than the man you chose to marry and have children with." Heat flooded my face. "That's not... I was just being honest about our dynamic. Every marriage has its challenges." "Indeed they do." Joan's voice was ice-cold now. "But most wives don't use family dinner as an opportunity to catalogue their husband's shortcomings for entertainment." "Joan," Callum's voice was quiet but firm, "that's enough." "No, I don't think it is enough." Joan turned to face her son. "How long are you going to let her speak about you this way? In front of your children, your family, your friends? When does it become enough?" The room fell completely silent except for the ticking of Eric's grandfather clock. Noah had slumped so low in his chair he was practically under the table, while Amelia's eyes were wide with the kind of fear children feel when their safe world suddenly reveals cracks. "I think," Callum said carefully, "we should probably head home." "Yes," I said, standing abruptly and nearly knocking over my wineglass. "I think that's best." The drive home was excruciating. The children sat in tense silence while I stared out the passenger window, replaying the dinner conversation and feeling increasingly angry rather than ashamed. How dare Joan ambush me like that? How dare she make me look like the villain when I was just being honest about our marriage? Lyra. Callum's voice broke the silence as we pulled into our driveway. What? We need to talk. If this is about your mother's little performance, it's not about my mother. He turned off the engine and sat for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel. Kids, go inside and get ready for bed. I'll be in to say goodnight in a few minutes. Noah and Amelia scrambled out of the car with obvious relief, leaving us alone in the gathering dusk. This isn't working, Callum said finally. Your mother attacking me at dinner. No, it's not. That's not what I mean, and you know it. He turned to face me, and in the dim light of the car, his expression looked different. Resolved. This. Us. The way we treat each other. The way we talk about each other. It's not working, and it's not fair to the kids. Something cold settled in my stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to figure out what comes next, because this, he gestured between us, isn't sustainable. Are you threatening me? No, Lyra, I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you that something has to change. He opened his car door. Think about what you really want, not what you think you should want, or what looks good from the outside. What you actually want. He left me sitting in the car, staring after him as he walked into our house to tuck our children into bed. For the first time, I noticed how straight his shoulders looked, how steady his step was. He didn't look weak anymore, and that scared me more than Joan's accusations ever could. The week following the disaster at Joan and Eric's house, I threw myself into work with renewed energy. If my own family couldn't appreciate me, at least I had colleagues who valued my contributions, especially Ian, whose attention had become the bright spot in increasingly grey days. You seem distracted, he observed during our morning coffee ritual, which had gradually extended from 20 minutes to nearly an hour. We'd started arriving even earlier, claiming the break room like our private sanctuary. Family drama, I said, stirring my coffee with more force than necessary. Callum's mother decided to stage an intervention at Sunday dinner. Ian's expression darkened. What kind of intervention? Oh, you know, the usual. Apparently I'm a terrible wife because I don't worship the ground my husband walks on. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. According to Joan, I should be grateful for Callum's, what did she call it? His quiet strength. That's ridiculous. Ian moved closer, ostensibly to refill his cup, but his proximity sent familiar warmth through my chest. You're vibrant, intelligent, successful. Any man would be lucky to have you. The validation felt like cool water on a burn. Thank you. Sometimes I wonder if I'm going crazy. You're not crazy. You're just underappreciated. His hand brushed mine as he reached for the sugar, and this time neither of us pulled away immediately. Some men don't know what they have until it's gone. The warning bell for the start of business rang, but we lingered for another moment, hands still touching, eyes locked. The attraction that had been simmering for months was rapidly approaching a boil. Ian, I know. His thumb traced across my knuckles. I know we shouldn't, but I can't stop thinking about you, about how much better you deserve. The words hung between us like a bridge I could choose to cross or burn. In that moment, standing in the break room with fluorescent lights humming overhead and the distant sound of office life beginning, I made my choice. Maybe we could talk more, outside of work sometime. His smile was radiant. I'd like that very much. That evening, Callum was in his home office when I returned from work, a small converted bedroom where he handled our finances and his freelance consulting projects. I could hear him on the phone, speaking in the measured tones he used for business calls. Yes, I understand the timeline. No, I think we should proceed as discussed. I'll have everything ready by Friday. Curious to spite myself, I lingered in the hallway. Callum rarely took evening calls, and something about his tone seemed different, more formal than his usual consulting work required. The documentation is comprehensive. Yes, I've been very thorough. Thank you, David. I'll see you then. David? I didn't recognize the name, and Callum's client list was small enough that I knew most of his contacts. When he emerged from the office a few minutes later, he seemed surprised to find me in the hallway. How long have you been standing there? I just got home. Who's David? Work contact. His answer was quick, dismissive. How was your day? The deflection felt deliberate, but I was too preoccupied with thoughts of Ian to pursue it. Fine, long. Callum studied my face with that unsettling intensity he'd developed lately. You seem different. Different how? Happier, maybe. More energetic. Guilt flashed through me, but I pushed it aside. Maybe I'm just finally feeling like myself again. Right. His tone was neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. I'm glad. Dinner was another exercise in polite distance, with the children filling most of the conversational gaps. But I noticed Callum watching me throughout the meal, noting when I checked my phone, observing my distraction when Noah asked about weekend plans. After the kids were in bed, I retreated to the living room with my laptop, ostensibly to catch up on emails, but really to continue the text conversation I'd started with Ian during my commute home. Today was the highlight of my week. His latest message read, "When can we have that talk we discussed?" I glanced toward the kitchen, where Callum was cleaning up, then typed back, "Soon." I need to figure out logistics. I'm patient. You're worth waiting for. The message made my pulse quicken, and I was so absorbed in crafting a response that I didn't notice Callum approaching until he spoke. "Lyra, I need you to sign something." I looked up, startled, to find him holding a folder and a pen. "What is it?" "Just some paperwork about our household expenses, for tax purposes." He set the documents on the coffee table beside my laptop. "The accountant needs both our signatures." I barely glanced at the papers, something about financial disclosure and asset documentation. Callum's handwriting filled most of the forms in his characteristically neat script. "This seems like a lot of paperwork for taxes," I said, but I was already reaching for the pen, eager to get back to my conversation with Ian. "You know how thorough I am," Callum replied, and there was something almost ironic in his tone. I signed where he indicated, 3 different places with yellow sticky notes marking the spots. The papers looked official, with letterhead I didn't recognize, but Callum handled all our financial paperwork anyway. I trusted him to manage the boring details, while I focused on more important things. "There," I said, handing back the pen. "All set." "Thank you." He gathered the papers carefully, sliding them back into the folder. "This will help clarify things significantly." Something about his phrasing nagged at me, but my phone buzzed with another message from Ian, and the moment passed. Later that night, as I lay in bed listening to Callum's steady breathing, I replayed the day's conversations. Ian's words about deserving better, the warmth of his attention, the promise of something more exciting than this mundane existence. I was so lost in those thoughts that I didn't notice Callum's breathing wasn't quite as steady as usual, or that he was staring at the ceiling with wide-open eyes, thinking about his meeting with David Morrison the next day. The papers I'd signed so carelessly weren't tax documents. They were sworn affidavits detailing our household finances, my work schedule, and my recent behavioral patterns, all prepared by Callum's attorney as part of a comprehensive legal strategy I couldn't have imagined my quiet, conflict-avoidant husband was capable of orchestrating. But I would learn soon enough. The man I'd married was still there, but he was no longer the man who would silently endure my contempt. He was protecting himself, methodically and thoroughly, in the way he approached everything that truly mattered to him. And I had just helped him do it. David Morrison's law office occupied the 3rd floor of a downtown building that managed to look both prestigious and approachable, exactly the kind of place Callum would choose after careful research. The conference room where they met had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, but Callum's attention was focused entirely on the manila folders spread across the polished table. You've been thorough, David said, reviewing the documentation with professional admiration. More thorough than most clients, honestly. Callum nodded, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. I wanted to be sure. Before I take this step, let's review what we have. David opened the first folder. Financial records going back 3 years, showing separate accounts she opened without your knowledge. Unexplained expenses that correlate with her work schedule changes. He moved to the second folder. Phone records. I know you had to subpoena these through your cellular provider, but they show a pattern of deleted messages and calls to the same number, primarily during work hours, but increasingly at other times. The third folder was thicker. Witness statements from family members, documentation of public incidents where she disparaged you in front of others, and, this is particularly compelling, the signed affidavit where she acknowledged the accuracy of your financial disclosures while being unaware she was providing testimony for legal proceedings. Callum winced. That feels like deception. It's standard practice, David assured him. You told her the truth. It was about financial disclosure. You simply didn't specify the purpose. She had every opportunity to read the documents before signing. She never reads anything I ask her to sign. Says she trusts me to handle the details. Which brings us to the pattern of dismissive behavior you've documented. David pulled out a tablet and scrolled through video files. These recordings from family gatherings show a consistent pattern of public humiliation and emotional manipulation. On the screen, Lyra's voice filled the conference room. Sometimes I feel like I'm running everything single-handedly. He researches everything to death instead of just making decisions. It's sweet, but not very decisive. Callum closed his eyes. I still can't believe I'm doing this. Callum, David's voice was gentle but firm. What changed your mind? When you first called me, you were ambivalent about proceeding. Last Sunday, at my parents' house. Callum opened his eyes, staring out the window at the city below. My mother confronted her about the way she speaks about me, and Lyra's response wasn't shame or recognition. It was anger. She was furious that someone called her out. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But it was more than that. It was watching Noah leave the table because he couldn't handle the tension anymore. It was seeing Amelia's face when the adults started fighting. My children are learning that this is what marriage looks like, that this is how people who love each other treat one another. David nodded. And the affair? I have suspicions, but no definitive proof yet. The emotional affair is clear. The deleted messages, the schedule changes, the way she lights up when her phone buzzes with texts from him. But I'm not sure it's become physical. Do you want to wait until we have that proof? Callum was quiet for a long moment. No, whether she's sleeping with him or not, she's already left our marriage emotionally. I'm just catching up. David closed the folders. Then we proceed. I'll file for legal separation first. It protects your assets and establishes custody arrangements while giving you both time to consider whether divorce is inevitable. What should I expect from her reaction? Denial, anger, attempts to shift blame. She'll likely claim you're overreacting, that you're destroying the family, that she was just being honest about normal marital frustrations. David's tone was matter of fact. In my experience, people who engage in this kind of systematic emotional manipulation rarely take responsibility when confronted with evidence. Callum nodded grimly. How long before she's served? The papers will be ready Monday. She'll be served at work. It's cleaner that way, more professional. As Callum left the law office, he felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. For months, he'd been documenting and preparing, but part of him had hoped it wouldn't come to this, that Lyra would recognize what was happening and choose to fight for their marriage instead of continuing to tear it down. But watching her sign those affidavits without reading them, seeing her immediate return to her phone and whatever conversation was more important than their relationship, had crystallized something for him. She wasn't fighting for their marriage because she didn't value it enough to fight for. Meanwhile, at home, I was experiencing the most exciting week I'd had in years. Ian and I had moved beyond coffee conversations to lunch meetings, and the chemistry between us was undeniable. He listened to me in a way that made me feel brilliant and fascinating. He laughed at my jokes, asked thoughtful questions about my opinions, and made me remember what it felt like to be genuinely desired. "You're glowing," my sister Marla observed during our Thursday evening phone call. "What's going on?" "Nothing dramatic," I said, though I couldn't keep the smile out of my voice. "Just feeling more like myself lately." "Good for you. You've seemed so drained the past few years. Callum's not exactly the most energizing presence." "No, he's not." I curled up on the couch, enjoying the rare moment of feeling understood. Sometimes I think about what my life would be like if I'd made different choices. "It's not too late to make different choices now," Marla said pointedly. The suggestion hung in the air between us, thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. "I have the kids to think about." Kids are resilient, and they'd probably be happier with a mother who's actually happy instead of slowly suffocating in suburban mediocrity. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet living room, thinking about Marla's words. Callum was upstairs helping Noah with homework, his patient voice drifting down as he explained math concepts for the third time. The sound should have made me feel grateful, but instead, it just reinforced how predictable our life had become. My phone buzzed with a text from Ian. "Thinking about you. Hope you're having a good evening." I typed back quickly. "Better now. Wish I was somewhere more interesting." Soon came his immediate reply. "I have some ideas about that." The promise in those words made my heart race. For the first time in years, I felt like I was on the verge of something exciting, something that would make me feel alive again. I had no idea that upstairs, Callum was helping our son with homework while simultaneously reviewing the final documents David Morrison had emailed him. The legal separation papers were ready. The custody arrangements were fair but protective, and the asset division reflected the careful documentation we'd spent months compiling. By Monday, everything would change. But for now, I sat in our living room, texting with another man and planning a future that didn't include the husband who was patiently teaching our children math problems, completely unaware that he was about to turn my world upside down with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else. The quiet man I'd underestimated for so long was about to remind me that still waters run very, very deep. The process server showed up on an ordinary Tuesday, just as I was laughing with Ian over morning coffee. Janet from reception appeared in the doorway, uneasy. "Lyra, someone's here with legal documents." The man was polite, professional. "You've been served." I opened the envelope right there in the lobby. Petition for legal separation. Callum's name, his signature. My hands shook as the room seemed to tilt. I locked myself in my office and read every page. Assets, custody, evidence, screenshots of texts I'd deleted, bank statements, witness statements from friends and teachers, my own sarcastic words, catalogued as emotional abuse, even forms I'd signed for taxes, now framed as financial misconduct. I called him, no answer. I drove home in a daze. Callum was making dinner, calm as ever. "How could you do this?" I demanded. "You asked for honesty," he said. "You laughed. So I paid attention." He showed me his folder, meticulous proof of everything. "You've been spying on me," I said. "Protecting myself," he replied. "I documented every insult, every lie." When I threatened to fight, he didn't flinch. "I've frozen the accounts. You can accept the separation, or we move to divorce." I realized, too late, that the man I'd dismissed as passive had quietly built a case strong enough to dismantle my entire life. The mediation took place in a sterile downtown room that smelled like old coffee and resignation. Callum sat across from me with his lawyer, calm and composed, while mine looked lost before we even began. What followed was a slow, surgical dismantling of my life. Callum had come armed with proof, bank records, witness statements, text messages with Ian I thought I'd deleted. It wasn't an affair, I tried to argue. The messages suggest otherwise, his lawyer said. Every defense I'd rehearsed collapsed under the weight of his preparation. Even the custody discussion, where I'd expected some victory, slipped away. He had documented everything I'd neglected, every missed pickup and forgotten appointment. During the break, I confronted him. "You're not this person," I said. "No," he replied, "but I had to become him to protect our children." When I signed the papers, joint custody, minimal assets, modest support, it felt like sentencing myself. As we left, I whispered, "I never meant for it to go this far." He met my eyes. Intent doesn't erase impact. Then he walked away, leaving me in the parking garage with the one truth I could no longer deny. The man I'd once dismissed as weak had finally found his strength, and he'd used it to save our family from me. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.